Poor folks always come last, huh? You must have plenty of time on your hands. As I grabbed a ticket for the bank counter, Bob looked down on me with disdain and said that, being the end of the year, the bank was packed. Pre-booking was recommended, but my schedule wasn't set until the last minute. So, I had to go there in person. Bob must be proud of being a main branch banker. Despite being at work, he boasted to me about his financial knowledge and how much money he's handled so far. I don't have a single good memory about Bob. It seemed foolish to entrust my money to a bank where such a classmate worked, so I told Bob firmly, which was unusual for me. Enough is enough. If you say one more word, I'll withdraw everything, you know. Hearing my words, Bob started laughing loudly, without a care for those around us. It's probably just $200, right? Just then, my number was called. Then, I told the lady at the counter, please withdraw all $10 billion. Soon, the branch manager, pale as a ghost, came to my booth. He then sternly urged a confused Bob, who didn't know what was happening. Our Bob here has been extremely rude. Bow your head now. But I didn't change my mind. I withdrew all $10 billion and deposited it in another bank. This completely turned Bob's smooth sailing life upside down. My name is Michael, 32 years old. Though in my 30s, I have zero experience working in a company. After high school, I lived a carefree life without working for a while. However, lately I've had a change of heart and started earning my own money. The one who spoke those heartless words to me was Bob. He's also 32, just like me. You might guess from our same age. Bob and me were classmates in middle school. Bob and I ran into each other at the bank, but we weren't exactly pals back in middle school. Man, those are some fancy sneakers. Rich folks sure are different, huh? On the way to school, Bob used to chase me down just to make snide remarks. It was his routine. At that time, I was wearing my brand new sneakers. I picked them because they were comfy for the 20-minute walk to and from school, and for gym class, too. They weren't dirt cheap, but they weren't pricey enough to warrant his sarcasm either. Nice shoes, but they're regular priced. Others wear the same ones, too. In fact, many classmates wore the same brand, although there's slight design differences. But Bob had just one goal: to outdo me. Back then, Bob, under his education-focused parents, was on the path of an elite middle schooler. He'd been going to English conversation classes since kindergarten and joined a cram school right when he started elementary school. He always ranked at the top in class since he prepared in advance at cram school. He was athletic and not bad-looking either. Bob was what you'd call a standout in our grade. He probably imagined he'd be someone amazing, shining in a glamorous world in the future. Baseless thoughts like that are pretty common during adolescence. Bob too believed it from the bottom of his heart. So, in his essays about his future dreams, he wrote about high-reaching careers like celebrities, professional soccer players, and the Prime Minister. Though his aspirations changed often, Bob, yearning for a world more glamorous than anyone else's, and wishing to be noticed more than anyone. As for me, I hated standing out more than anything. In class, I never raised my hand unless called upon by the teacher. I know that raising your hand is seen as showing initiative and can positively affect your grades. But I wanted to keep my distance from a competitive society and lead a peaceful life. Michael, if you're thinking about further education, it's good to get some experience speaking in front of people. If that's too much, at least try raising your hand in class. You're so good at written tests. It's a shame not to do just that. My class teacher, concerned about my overly passive attitude, once told me this. Nowadays, schools not only focus on test scores but also on participation in class when grading. She was worried because my grades were falling due to my high test scores but low participation. Teacher, I'm really not concerned about grades. Being exposed to so many gazes stresses me out and makes me feel unwell. Honestly, just entering the classroom is all I can manage. I'd much rather study at home. I plan to go to a part-time high school, so please let me continue as I am. I honestly expressed my feelings to my class teacher. It's fairly well known now that some middle schoolers, due to innate brain characteristics, struggle with reading the room or are overly sensitive to others' words. That was exactly me. If I force myself to fit in, I might eventually become unable to even enter the classroom. That's why I decided to live life at my own pace right from the start. My parents, who have observed me since I was young, understand what I'm trying to say. However, my class teacher didn't quite seem to get it. Yet, fate has its ironies. I ended up in the spotlight despite not wanting it. One morning, middle school students, including me, had to enter the school gates while being jostled by the media's barrage of interviews. "Excuse me, you there, can I interview you for a moment?" Fortunately or unfortunately, it was Bob who got caught for an interview by a reporter from a well-known weekly magazine. For Bob, who loves the limelight, it was an unparalleled opportunity to be in front of a camera. Bob stood in front of the camera, thrilled. A festival was about to be held near the school soon. Bob seemed to think it was surely an interview about the festival. However, the content of the interview was completely different from what Bob expected. "So, John attends this middle school, right? What kind of middle schooler is he? Is he the star of the music class as expected? Does he ever compose or perform songs at school?" Reporters rapidly fire questions at Bob, but Bob just stood there, dumbfounded. It seemed like he had no idea who they were asking about. Who is John? There's nobody by that name at our middle school." The reporter looked at Bob in surprise. It seemed unexpected to them that he didn't know. "You know, don't you, Michael? They say John is actually him." Bob was confused by the sudden mention of a celebrity's name. John is a lyricist and composer. He's been providing songs to a skyrocketing popular idol group, but hasn't shown his face. Shrouded in mystery, the media was eager to uncover his true identity. What? No way. He doesn't have that kind of talent. He barely even sings in music class. "Sorry, I'm out of time, I have to go." Bob couldn't believe that I was the buzzed-about hitmaker. Bob, who longed for the glamorous life and yearned for social success more than anyone. What if I, his classmate, had already achieved that dream in the world of music? If that were true, it would have been nothing but humiliation for Bob. That day, an emergency assembly gathered all students in the gym. It was crystal clear that it was about the media prowling around the school. First, the principal took the stage to explain the situation. "Everyone, it must have been tough with all the questions today. Those who were interviewed might guess, but this all started from the reports about John. Your class teachers will discuss the management of this issue." Urged by the principal, my class teacher stepped onto the stage. My class teacher seems confused by the sudden turn of events. He looks utterly exhausted, as if he hadn't slept a wink. Recently, it was widely reported in a magazine that Michael from my class, using the pseudonym John, provided songs for a popular idol group. There were even candid photos published. As you all know, those songs were massive hits. The media frenzy to uncover his identity has made him publicly known. Situations like today might continue for a while. But please, do not give any interviews. Even minor comments can become a big deal. Just say the school forbids interviews, and you'll be fine. Many of you must be curious about Michael, but he's very tired now. Please give him some space for the time being. Middle school students, while still mischievous, are at an age where they can understand adult situations. The students followed class teachers' instructions well. No one spoke about me to the media, nor did anyone pester me with questions. There was one exception, and that was Bob. Can you really be the one providing songs to those idols? That group is under a major agency, and you have no apparent connection with them, right? During lunch breaks, Bob came up to me and barraged me with such questions. To learn that a seemingly unremarkable classmate is suddenly a celebrity, and not just any celebrity, but one hailed as a born genius with exceptional talent. Attention-seeking Bob must have been jealous. It was becoming hard to stay calm. "Sorry, I can't really talk about it. I don't even know what to do myself. I have no answers, so please let it be." Hey, don't act all high and mighty. We're classmates, right? What's with the attitude? Besides, how can you prove you wrote those songs? The lyrics express the inner feelings of girls in such detail. There's no way you could write something like that. You didn't hire a ghostwriter, did you? I'm what you'd call an unremarkable student. I can understand why Bob would think that. Currently, the songs I've provided for a well-known idol group, expressing the emotional turmoil and conflicts of teenage girls, are known to everyone. It's unimaginable for anyone, not just Bob, that I wrote the lyrics for such songs. Incidentally, the idol group I provided songs for was a local group quietly doing their activities. Once, they had an open call for original songs to enrich their repertoire. As someone who enjoyed songwriting, I applied on a whim at my parents' suggestion and, before I knew it, made it to the final selection and had my song chosen as a single. It must have matched the zeitgeist. Before I knew it, the pop group, with several songs I created, had risen to national fame. I provided about 10 songs, and each one was a smash hit. Some were even used in TV commercials. The fan base was mainly young boys and girls, but the songs also resonated with folks over 40, bringing back bittersweet memories of their youth. People would probably be disappointed to know that the person behind these songs is me, someone who's not good at socializing and lacks any social grace. I never wanted to be in the spotlight and didn't want to ruin the song's essence, so I kept my name and face hidden, providing songs exclusively to this pop group. You can think I'm using a ghostwriter. I don't care who knows my real identity. I'd even like someone else to take over. My indifference to being in the glamorous world must have bothered him even more. From then on, Bob became suddenly condescending towards me. The worst was during the unforgettable preparations for the cultural festival. "Michael, you've written so many hit songs. You must be a great singer too. Then you should do the choir solo by yourself." Somehow, I had a talent for writing songs, but I wasn't good at singing. I'm tone deaf. When it comes to singing, Bob is way better. In fact, Bob's singing ability was high. He was the type who excelled at karaoke. Normally, he would volunteer to sing in public before anyone else. But this year, for some reason, Bob was trying to make me sing. Being known as a genius who produced hit songs, he probably wanted to embarrass me by having me sing off-key in public. Eventually, the music teacher, hearing the commotion, decided to eliminate the solo part. Even after this uproar, I continued writing songs for a while. I knew well that the 5 members, since their local idol days, had dreamed of success in show business, practicing hard after school. My songs were well received because they reflected the nuances of the members' hearts. I thought it wasn't right to withdraw just because my information was out there. But then the situation changed dramatically. The idol group decided to disband. It was a decision resulting from various factors associated with becoming famous. The group was mainly middle schoolers, so they were getting to the age where they were considering high school. They wanted to be famous, but when they actually became known nationwide, they couldn't freely hang out or speak their minds anymore. Success comes with its own losses. The more famous the members got, the more they struggled with whether this was the right path. The management considered keeping the group name, but replacing the members. However, the longtime fans couldn't accept a complete member swap and pushed back. The impact on my middle school life as the song provider also contributed, and the members decided to graduate all at once at their last live performance, leading to the group's dissolution. The media couldn't possibly know the intricate details. After the decision to disband was made, rumors spread that I, John, hit a slump and couldn't produce songs like before, leading to the group's inevitable dissolution. I didn't bother to defend against these claims. After that, I stopped writing songs. Regardless of the reason, I was happiest about becoming just a regular middle schooler again. The one who was most pleased with the change in my life was Bob. Despite not being particularly close, he'd always come running over when he saw me. I guess the entertainment world really is tough and not easy to succeed in. You can't just easily make money. And you're gonna go to a part-time high school, right? What are you gonna do there? Especially now that you've lost your songwriting gig. I've always wanted to go to a part-time high school. It's got nothing to do with making music. Right, don't make excuses. Just accept the loss as a loss. You can catch up even if you start studying for exams now, can you? Poor thing, you've really wasted your life. Bob, completely misunderstanding, looked at me triumphantly. I easily felt stressed in group settings and wanted to live life at my own pace. I simply chose a part-time high school because of its relaxed class schedule. Yet, Bob assumed I chose part-time high school because I was banking on my songwriting work. Bob, who had been attending cram school since he was young, was going to the second-ranked public high school in our hometown. Incidentally, he had to give up on the #1 high school as he didn't have the grades. From my middle school, one girl got accepted into that top high school. Bob's jealousy shifted to that girl, and I, now just an ordinary middle schooler, was finally freed. The part-time high school had students of various ages and backgrounds. While the annoyances of group life weren't zero, I had a fairly fulfilling student life. As my new life became routine, Bob faded from my mind. Then, more than 10 years later, I unexpectedly ran into Bob again. It happened when I went to the main branch of the bank to withdraw some money from my account. Both Bob and I are in our 30s now. The vibe was quite different from our middle school days, but Bob's thick, arched eyebrows and somewhat condescending attitude were the same as before. As for me, still dressing like I was just out of school, Bob probably recognized me right away. He approached me with a triumphant look on his face. "The pool always come last. You must be free anyway." I was speechless, holding a bank counter ticket in my hand. Not the kind of words you'd expect from a banker at the main branch. Bob, fully aware of his position, said in a hushed voice, so others couldn't hear. The bank was bustling. Being the end of the year, people visit the bank for various reasons: opening accounts, cash transactions, transfers, etc. Especially busy was the investment consultation desk. People wanting to grow their winter bonuses, protect savings for retirement, or being advised by bankers to invest after seeing their savings account balances, perhaps to guide them in financial products. Bank staff seemed to be on standby everywhere, and one of them was Bob. Due to the year-end rush, the bank recommended making reservations online. However, due to work, I couldn't finalize my schedule. So, I decided to go directly without a prior reservation. "There's a number ticket here. Just guide me in order, that'll be fine." If I could just fake a smile, life wouldn't be so hard. I ended up making a face like it was all too much bother. That ended up ticking off Bob. Guess he's trying to one-up me. Out of nowhere, Bob started bragging about his career, even though nobody asked. Never thought I, just a branch employee, would make it to a banker at the main branch. Lots of foreign companies around here, so I deal a lot in English. You know, having rich financial knowledge and being fluent in English, plus being sharp, it's hard to find the right fit even in a bank this size. Despite being at work, he starts blabbering about how skilled he is. According to Bob, he's built up a decent financial portfolio personally. Well, when I say financial assets, it's only about $20 million. Could have saved more, but I spent it on my annual trips abroad. Think of it as buying experiences, or like an investment in myself. I had come in that day just to withdraw some cash from my account. Just opened the account because a friend asked me to. Had no attachment to the bank whatsoever. Then I found out a classmate I can't stand works at the main branch. Started feeling stupid for even having an account there, especially with the way he was talking down to me. Gonna withdraw everything, okay. When I said that, Bob burst out laughing. Suddenly, he blurts out loudly, "It's probably just $200 anyway." All the customers around us started staring. I've never felt so embarrassed. Luckily, it was my turn just then. I told the staff at the counter, "I'm withdrawing the full $10 billion. I'm closing my account with this bank today." The lady at the counter's face went pale. She tries to talk me out of closing the account, but my mind was made up. Sensing this, the staff member went to the back. After a while, the main branch manager, pale as a ghost, comes over to where I'm sitting. Then, with a stern tone, he addresses Bob, who's standing behind me looking confused. Bob was extremely rude. "Come on, what are you waiting for? Bow your head too. Even if you say that, did I cause any problem? Don't you understand anything? You don't know Investor Michael, do you? He's got enough clout to move the entire US economy. Our bank, as Michael's main bank, is holding a whopping $10 billion for him. And you, a main branch banker, don't know this." Neither the branch manager nor Bob's immediate boss, both seasoned bankers with 10 years of experience, could ever have dreamed that a mid-level banker like them would be so rude to a customer. They hadn't shared detailed client information with Bob, who had just transferred from another branch. Along with the branch manager, Bob apologized to me several times. but I didn't change my mind. I transferred all of the $10 billion in my account to another bank with trustworthy bankers. Bob offered to come and apologize many times, but I refused. For about half a year after that, I didn't meet Bob. Suddenly, having lost the $10 billion deposit, it seemed Bob was severely reprimanded by his superiors. Since I closed the account, there's no need to talk to anyone from that bank. Though I felt sorry, I ignored Bob's calls by pretending not to be home. I thought I'd never meet Bob again, but that wasn't the case. A few months after our encounter at the bank, I once again bumped into Bob by chance. The place of our reunion was a popular pub, not really fitting for someone as elite-minded as Bob. I came to the pub to attend a certain party. Arriving earlier than planned, I entered to wait in a reserved private room. That's when I noticed a man drinking a highball at a counter seat in the corner. It was Bob. I wasn't sure whether to speak up. Just then, Bob looked my way. "Aren't you Michael? Long time no see. Drinking alone here doesn't seem like you." The moment I saw Bob's face, I was at a loss for words. There was stubble around his mouth. He probably hadn't been to the barber in a while. His hair was long and messy from bedhead. The once confident expression was completely gone. "You must be surprised to see how much I've changed. I bet you can't believe I'm a banker," looking at my shabby appearance. The smell of alcohol on Bob made it clear he'd been drinking since noon. Not knowing what situation Bob was in, I couldn't find the words to say, so I just silently stared at his face. Then, after gulping down his highball, Bob glared at me and asked in a rough voice, "Why did you have $10 billion in your bank account back then? Sure, you released a hit song in middle school, but you haven't done any music since the idol group disbanded, right? And you even went to a part-time high school. With that kind of education, there's no way you'd have the chance to get $10 billion. What happened for it to turn out like this?" Bob's hand, clutching the empty glass, was trembling slightly. His tone was filled with irritation, jealousy, sadness, despair, and regret. Honestly, I didn't want to talk about myself to others. However, I was worried that if things continued this way, Bob's spirit might break. What Bob needed was to accept the gap between ideal and reality. To move forward, knowing his own limits. I decided to talk about myself. "You know, I was involved in music production in middle school. I'm not making music anymore, but I do have a decent income. The songs I released back then are still occasionally covered. They're sung in karaoke and used as TV show BGM. So, thankfully, I get a decent amount of royalties every year. I'm really bad at socializing, so I gave up on working in a company. After high school, I just lived quietly on my royalties." "You mean you're not working?" "I can say I work hard like many people here, but in exchange, I do volunteer work. Even though I could live on my royalties, my parents worried about my weak social connections. They suggested I restart my music activities, but having learned from the chaos of my middle school days, I couldn't bring myself to re-enter the entertainment industry. Then my parents introduced me to a volunteer organization through their contacts. This organization supports kids with disabilities or those who don't fit in at school. We recruit college student volunteers to teach them and organize events for social participation. The one who welcomed me was Susan. She's a lady in her 80s who's engaged in volunteer work. Susan had a son with disabilities who, after a long battle with illness, passed away in his 30s. Afterwards, wanting to save as many kids as possible who felt life was tough, she invested her own money and started a foundation with her husband as she entered her 50s. I got involved in the unknown world of volunteering quite unexpectedly. Initially, I wasn't too enthusiastic. I participated just to please my parents. But a particular request from Susan changed my perspective completely. "You can write lyrics and compose music, right? Could you create a song that everyone participating in the volunteer activities can sing together?" Since I left the music world, I hadn't composed any songs. It was painful to try, as memories from that time would resurface. A theme song for the volunteer organization would be fine since it's just for us. Thinking this, I agreed and spent a month completing a song. Then, before starting volunteer activities, everyone began singing the song I created. The melody was simple with minimal variation, something anyone could make. I realized the song I made played a role in bringing together people of different generations, genders, and family backgrounds, and my awareness started to change. Since then, I started spending more time creating music, playing piano at the volunteer organization's choral competitions, and composing for stages and commercials. How does your volunteer work tie in with that account holding $10 billion? And why can you compose music? Were you an apprentice to a musician or something? Despite becoming so famous, why did you quit making music? I just can't figure out what you're doing and what you're thinking. It seemed Bob, dreaming of a glamorous world, couldn't help but be curious about how I succeeded in the music world and why I had an asset worth $10 billion. Ever since I was little, I just couldn't blend in with groups for some reason, and often found myself alone. Worried, my dad bought me a keyboard. It started off as a child's toy, but before I knew it, I started creating my own music. Soon, my bedroom was filled with instruments and recording equipment. I got so absorbed in writing music that I'd stay up late into the night. For me, music wasn't about becoming famous. It was a way to overcome loneliness. As my music began to gain recognition, I ended up feeling even more isolated at school. The adults who approached me were mostly untrustworthy, which only made me feel lonelier, and I withdrew. Though it ended that way, thankfully, the royalties started coming in steadily. But does that really amount to $10 billion? Half of it I increased through investments. The other half was donated by Susan during his lifetime. Susan passed away a few years ago due to old age. What Susan was concerned about until the end was the volunteer organization he started with his husband, thinking of their son. Susan's husband was a well-known landowner in the area. Therefore, Susan had inherited a considerable fortune. However, the child who was supposed to inherit it was not in this world. So, Susan nominated me as the organizer of the organization before her death and donated most of her fortune to it. Right now, we're building an educational exchange facility to increase opportunities for children with disabilities to thrive in society. $5 billion was from Susan, and another $5 billion was my contribution. This $10 billion is more about the sentiment than the money. It's steeped in all the hardships, worries, and conflicts. And of course, there's a lot of joy and sorrow that words just can't express. After hearing about my journey, Bob looked down and fell silent. Maybe he was perplexed by a turn of events completely different from what he had imagined. "Michael, what's the matter? It's time already." A woman in her early 30s calls me from the private room we had reserved. Today, after a series of meetings for the construction of the educational exchange facility, we decided to have a drinking party with the volunteer organization's members. Actually, she's my wife. She's a former member of that idol group and has been supporting Susan's activities since her teens. She became famous for a while as an idol, but always felt something was missing. She says she's most fulfilled now. Being famous doesn't fulfill everything. Having money doesn't mean you have everything. Bob's measure of happiness was always whether he could stand above others. But I wanted Bob to realize that it wasn't necessary to be that way. As time was pressing, I left Bob with a see ya. Afterward, I gradually got the facility that connects children with disabilities to society on track. Our activities, including learning support for truant children, gained media attention and were increasingly featured on TV and in magazines. But I still struggle with being in the spotlight. That's why I've asked my wife, who is my assistant, to take interviews on my behalf. I learned about Bob's whereabouts later at a middle school reunion. After quitting his bank job due to our incident, Bob spent some time unemployed, but it seems he's recently started job hunting. I thought he'd aim for a big corporation, but it seems he's mainly applying to pub chains. During his unemployment, he was encouraged by many people he met by chance while drinking at pubs, and he regained the motivation to restart his life. He wants to create a tranquil space where people who can find their place can gather in the future. He hopes to work at a bar as training towards that goal. Bob seems to have completely lost his obsession with being an elite in charge of others. Originally, Bob and I, with our opposite personalities, might surprisingly be in similar places now. The day when Bob and I can talk about our future dreams may not be far off. I thought I'd never have this in my life, but now, I feel like I've found a future best friend.